All right, hello everybody, and welcome to lesson 2 on lesson planning. Hopefully you had a chance to go through year planning and unit planning, and now we're going to have a shot at lesson planning in ELA. Okay, so I'm going to look at some general concepts around lesson planning and then start to pull it tight around lesson planning in ELA. So, okay, I got several computers going here. Okay, so the goal for today is for you to continue the journey of constructing plans from macro, those year plans, to micro, to what are you going to do in the next 15 minutes, right? With knowledge of the intricacies of elementary literacy and language so that you can be an amazing and inspiring language arts teacher, right? That's what we want. We want you to be amazing and inspiring. Okay, here we go. So why even bother doing a lesson plan, right? You might be like, my partner teacher says, oh yeah, you only do these lesson plans at college. There's some fairness about that. But what it does is at this point, we want you to be writing out what I call fleshy lesson plans so that you know how many different parts there are to every lesson that you create in order to make the learning as efficient, exciting, and as authentic as possible. Okay, so basically, why do a lesson plan? Well, it ensures you actually have a plan versus just, I call shooting from the hip, right? You can't walk into a classroom and just be like, oh yeah, what are we going to do today, kids? We've all had those teachers, and it's a waste of time. Right? It's a waste of time, and we don't want to waste time. So it ensures you have a plan. It helps you fulfill those objectives or those outcomes, which you now know are your responsibility as a teacher to be making sure that those objectives and outcomes are fulfilled. Okay? It helps to keep you organized, right? So if you're like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to move to this, and I've thought about my transitions and I've thought about how many times kids are moving around the classroom, and I actually know what materials I need so that I have my stack of books or pencils or whiteboards or computers, it keeps you organized. It helps you also anticipate issues. So when you are thinking about an activity, so say you're doing stand-up pair up, and you go, but I got those two little guys that if they pair up, it's going to be a nightmare. So maybe I do a bit of a different cooperative learning strategy where I organize the groups, right? So and it leads into the next bullet point. It helps with classroom management because you're actually thinking about classroom management when you plan your lesson. So you say, okay, this particular class really will go crazy with this particular this particular activity. So do I want to deal with the classroom management issues that are going to arise if I do this activity, or do I want to do a slightly different activity or organize it in a different way? So you're seeing the minutia that teachers have to think about in order. Great teachers make it look easy because they've thought through that minutia. Okay. It helps, the next point, helps consider the child, the children, or the group. So basically, you can then be sitting at home, hopefully with a coffee, and thinking about the particular children in your classroom versus having to react. You want to be proactive and not reactive. So you can consider, what does a particular child need? What do these particular children and what does this group need? Okay. It helps you consider variety in lesson, because if all you're doing is going in and shooting from the hip and not really planning, you'll probably end up doing the same kind of lesson over and over and over again, because you revert back in the moment in front of the class when everybody's staring at you waiting for you to do something, is you revert back to probably how you were taught, or teachers revert back to just talking, right? We love to talk. And so it helps you go, oh, actually, I need a movement break here. Oh, they've been sitting and writing for a long time in their grade 2s. Oh, I actually need some more visuals here. So it helps you consider the variety in lesson. It makes you ponder your materials, your setup, your time, and your space. right? So if you say, I want to do this great collaborative strategy, but you have no room in your classroom to move around, that's probably not going to work. And if you just try to do it in the moment, it's going to be a disaster. And then you're going to have issues and classroom management issues, things like that. You have to consider assessment. How are you going to tell if the students have actually learned what you wanted them to learn? And I know that assessment is not a big focus this year, but you have to assess a little bit. You will know more about assessment after your assessment course. Okay, and it's your job. When you're a teacher, that's what you do. You plan for learning. So it's your job to do lesson plans. So if you have in the past, maybe you have a teacher that's like, yeah, I don't do lesson plans. That's just for college. I think some of those teachers are lame because they're not taking into account all of these things, and they're not improving as a teacher and not really bringing to the table what these kids deserve. Okay, so it's your job. It's your job to do lesson plans. Okay, so to begin lesson planning, what do you need to do? So you want to think about backwards design. So backwards design is where you start with, what do you want the students to learn? Instead of just kind of chugging away and hoping you get somewhere, you're like, okay, what do I actually want them to learn from this lesson, from this, or from the set of lessons or this unit? So you're going to, you want to think about the objectives. So think about those objectives that you have put on your year plan, you've put on your unit plan, and now you've picked specifically for this particular lesson. Okay? And you want to think about assessment. How am I ultimately going to assess these kids on understanding? So if it's going to just be formative assessment, all of the decisions you make will look different than if you're going to do a test at the end, or if the students are going to do an infographic display of their knowledge, or if the students are going to do a play. So you can see then, you have to know how you're going to assess in order to plan your activities. Hopefully that makes sense, because often what happens is we start at the top. We're like, okay, what are we going to do with the students? But then we don't actually have an end goal. We don't really know what we're aiming for. So you have to think about those objectives and how you're actually going to fulfill those objectives. That comes usually in your unit plan, right? So what are my big ideas? And then it comes down to the lesson plan. Okay, picture number 2. When you start lesson planning, picture your actual class. You maybe have a class that is amazing at group work. And so you're like, okay, I can actually do a lot of group work. You may have a class that is really resistant to group work. So you may have to introduce group work a little bit more slowly than you might another class. Okay, so picture your actual class. You now have the advantage is you actually can picture your practicum class. So in all of the planning, picture your particular students. Think about differentiation. This is going to be a little bit of a focus for us this year because it's a big topic. Differentiation is a big topic. And you had some readings on this, so I'm going to allude to those a little bit later. But really, we're going to try to get our heads around differentiation because it's hard. Differentiation is hard. Don't think it's not. It's hard to do, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. We have to go after it because that's, again, our job. And I want you to think about different activities. Again, can you, instead of talking about something, can you have them actually experience it? Can you take them outside? Can you take them to the gym? Can you take them out in the hallway? I know, and it's COVID, yeah, can't do that. But hopefully we don't live with COVID the rest of our teaching careers. But think about your activities in there. Okay, I'm going to go out of the PowerPoint now, and I'm going to go to This is under your lesson plan, or under lesson 2, sorry, use my words. And I'm going to just flip this over here so that you can see. What I've done is I have given you an exemplar particularly for ELA. Okay, because I think sometimes it's a bit ethereal. What do I do? So this is a concrete lesson plan. And then what I've done is I've taken the lesson plan explained concepts that Laura Lee and Jason introduced to you, and I put them on the side. So you could click through and see exactly what is going on. So basically here, I would always put your lesson, I would always put which lesson it is in the unit, the date, and how long. Because you will write a lot of lessons, and if you don't, it's really hard to decipher which ones are which. Okay, so here we go. So for your outcomes of your lesson, these come from your unit plan. So they come the year plan, down to the unit plan, and then down to the lesson plan. However, you should only be using about 2 to 3 per lesson. If you have 16 per lesson in a 55-minute lesson, are you actually going to be able to fulfill those outcomes? No. So we found that 2 to 3, usually you can at least start to fulfill these outcomes. Now, does this mean that you will never come back to 4.3.8, present to peers ideas and information on a topic of interest in a well-organized fashion? You will absolutely keep coming back to that. Very rarely in elementary do you just do one lesson and just fulfill the outcome. Usually you keep coming back to it. Okay, and this is verbatim, word for word. You don't switch it here. This is just copy and paste. Put it in here because you want to be able to go back to the actual words from the program of studies. Okay, so here, how will I know students have achieved the learning outcome? This is so important. This drives your whole lesson. If you don't know what you want the students to achieve, then your lesson might be fun, but you won't be fulfilling outcomes, and you won't be able to assess anything. So again, be really specific. You should be able to visualize exactly what the students will be doing in order to achieve the learning outcome. Okay, so let's look at number 1 here. Number 1 is students will show information in an organized way, orally to a partner and written on a whiteboard. Can you picture that in your mind? Students will show information in an organized way, orally to a partner. So what are they doing? They're talking to a partner and they're showing their organization skills, and then they're writing on a whiteboard. So if they're all over the place, can you basically tell if they have fulfilled that outcome? Yes. Okay, so that's how specific I want you to be. Link to the ELA fundamentals code here. Okay, so this is where this one is an addition that I've added on for ELA that wasn't in the lesson plan explained, but it's not a huge addition. So what you're going to do is you're going to use the ELA fundamentals code here. I've color coded it so that you can just basically highlight what you think is fulfilling the ELA fundamentals here. Okay, so for students will show that's going to show me if they actually are comprehending. Students orally links to oral language, and written is writing. Okay, so I want you to use these colors and highlight where you think your learning outcomes are linked to these ELA fundamentals. Basically, you're going to aim for 2 to 4 of the fundamentals for each lesson. You won't probably, in many lessons, do all 7. So don't panic. If you look and you say, I only have 3, that's fine. However, if you look back on 2 weeks of lessons and you haven't done any vocab, you don't have any green highlighting, you probably need to be able to, you probably need to change it up so that you add some vocab in there. Okay. This is one of the banes of my existence in this. Avoid vague statements like they will be able to understand. How can you, I'm going to jump down to here. Ultimately, this is the section that you will use to assess if your students have actually have understood the outcomes, if they've actually achieved the outcomes. So if you say students will be able to understand how to create a well-organized form, how are you ever going to assess that? However, if you have students will show information in an organized way orally to a partner, can you assess that? Yep, I'm watching this kid. They are talking to their partner. They're going through the list chronologically. They're showing it in an organized manner, or they're showing it in a mind map manner. It doesn't have to be chronological, but they're showing me that they have organized it. That I can assess. I cannot assess, do they understand? I can't get in their little heads. I can't saw off their heads and see. That's bad. Don't saw off their heads. Okay, and know that your learning outcomes may take a number of lessons to fully achieve. Okay, so don't panic if maybe over 2 or 3 lessons, you have 1 or 2 of the same outcomes. If you have 17 lessons and that's all the same outcomes, then we'll challenge you, because it's kind of like, okay, no, you need to be switching those up as you go through. Okay, so let's look here now. Check this website for your Bloom's verbs and then use them in each learning outcome. So you will see, I think if I go to this right now, I like this particular Bloom's taxonomy verb chart because you can search it and it has a lot of verbs. So use one of these verbs. If the verb is not on this list, or if your word is not on this list, it's not going to work, because the Bloom's verbs lead directly to assessment. Okay, so keep that chart close to your heart throughout this term, because you will show, utilize, rephrase, analyze, create, right? Those are active Bloom's verbs. So use those Bloom's verbs in there. Okay, here we go. Hook. Relate the hook to your outcomes. Okay, this isn't a time to gather the students together. So basically what I'm going to do is to introduce Reader's Theater. Hopefully you had a chance to watch that 5-minute video on Reader's Theater from the unit plan. It'll give you an idea of what is going on here. So basically my hook is I'm going to read out a portion of Casey the Bat in Reader's Theater style without any introduction. So I'm just going to start into this, and hopefully that will be a cool hook. Okay, how do you make your students lean forward? Okay, if it's longer than a few minutes, it becomes a learning opportunity, right? So it's not just okay, today class, we're going to do Reader's Theater. How exciting is that? It's not, right? So you want something to draw them in. You want to draw them in to the lesson. Okay, so you could use a puppet. To introduce a concept, you could play a song without telling them why. I had a student teacher in Calgary who was he was in a junior high science practicum, and he started every class with a science experiment, and he didn't tell them why. He had his little white lab coat on and his little lab glasses and his little geeky bow tie, and he just did these experiments, and literally kids were running, grade 8s were running down the hall to see this experiment. It was super cool. Okay, so think about that hook. You want to grab their attention there. Okay, now, learning opportunities. This is what we'll spend a lot of time on. What are you actually going to do here? So for me, for Reader's Theater, I'm going to conduct a mini lesson on the carpet to full class on the characteristics of Reader's Theater. And then I put exactly where my PowerPoint is. Reader's Theater, intro, intro, it should be PowerPoint in grade 4 Readers Theater folder. There's nothing worse than coming back to a lesson and all you have is watch video. It's like, oh, darn, where's that video? It's such a good one. And then you spend 20 minutes trying to find the video and maybe you can't even find it anymore. Be really specific. It'll help you later. Okay. I would write out the characteristics here because you don't want this to be a script, but you want to put enough information here so that when you're dealing with classroom management and kids coming and going and moving around, you don't forget things. So I would put in all of the different characteristics, and then we're going to watch grade 4's theater example here, and before watching, ask them to watch for characteristics. So you can see that I've really thought about prepping the students for the content and then leading them through it. And here's my example. Then I put in my collaborative stand-up, pair up, share examples. I'll prompt which characteristic to share. And while that's going on, I'll put out whiteboards, pens, and gloves. They're going to come back together to the carpet, have students write on their individual whiteboards as many characteristics. Don't have PowerPoint slide up. Okay, are you seeing how the minutia of this is? Okay, so I don't have it all scripted out exactly what I'm going to say. There might be certain things that you want to script out. If you're like, if I miss a characteristic, then it's going to, sorry, my computer just shut down. It's going to throw off the whole lesson. But basically for 30 minutes, this is what I have written down for 30 minutes. So I don't have everything. I don't have it all scripted. Okay. So put enough detail here so that someone else could teach the lesson and not be confused. So if I'm reading your lesson, I should be able to picture in my head, spin the movie reel. I should be able to picture in my head what's going on, right? If I go, I don't know what's happening now, that's not good. So even have somebody who's not in the class read your lesson plan, because then they'll go, no, I can't picture what you're doing here. Everybody should be able to picture it. And again, put the links. Okay, so this section, how do I check that students understand instruction? Focus on how you will know students understand your instructions, not content. So what I don't want to see here is I will observe the students, because by that time, it's too late. The students are already out doing their thing. What you want to do is say, okay, I'm going to send them out into small groups. How do I know they actually know what to do when they get into small groups? Because what happens? It happens with you guys too. I give the instructions, wah, wah, wah. You go into your small group, and then what do? You say, what are we supposed to do? Elementary kids do the exact same thing. So have them repeat back each step of the instruction as a class. Ask Billy, Sarah, and Matt to orally repeat back each step in order so that they know what to do. Or if I say, okay, what time are you supposed to be back from your small groups? 11:45. Okay, you've just reiterated what either end time or kind of what they're supposed to do. So it's not, I will observe the students, or it's not, I will do a check of their understanding. It's not about understanding. It's about understanding the instructions. Okay, here we go. Let's keep going. Materials needed, be really specific. Like, I need 27 markers. And then be organized with your materials. When you're out on practicum, you're responsible for making sure everything's ready to go. Don't depend on your partner teacher, right? You're responsible. And don't assume that technology will work in your classroom. Bring up the PowerPoint ahead of time. Make sure that the actual platform that you're hoping to use is actually on there. So if you're thinking you might use Jamboard, then you have to make sure that you can access Jamboard on that particular computer. Okay, so that's question. Okay. Differentiation. This is huge. And hopefully you had a chance to read some of those articles on differentiation. What will you do before class to prepare for all these levels of learners in your class for the learning opportunity above? Okay. So this is you thinking about all of the different levels in your class and going, okay, I know that I have some beginning and developing students who will have trouble understanding this particular Reader's Theater concept. So I I'm going to have a pre-made sheet of characteristics listed in print and graphics as a guide for when they watch the video. So I'm going to let those students use that list. And I think you might say, well, what if everybody wants it? Well, you could make it available to everybody. Or what you could do is those kids, they want to be able to participate and they want to be able to learn, and oftentimes they will be very appreciative of having a little bit of extra help. You don't see that. Okay, Billy, Sarah, come get your sheet because I know you won't understand this. No, absolutely not. All you do is when they're watching it, you just put it in front of them, and they generally will gravitate to it. Okay. Achieving is as per your lesson above. So basically your lesson is aimed at kids achieving it. And then exceeding for this particular lesson is during the analysis. So while they're looking for these particular characteristics on Reader's Theater, during analysis, I want the exceeding to write down ideas and synthesis of discussion on the board. So they could be writing some things on the board that we could utilize in an analysis section. Okay, so this is what I do before. I want to, craziness. How can you differentiate a beginning child that does not include working with an exceeding child? Oftentimes it'll be like, we'll just pair them up, an exceeding child and a beginning child. You can, but that should happen like once every 2 or 3 weeks, not every lesson. How will you use modify resources for students to support their affective needs? Do you need a little separate mini lesson with 1 or 2 students to clarify? Do you need to give them sentence stems for journaling or cutting objects out for a paper with a child with limited dexterity? Okay, so how will you differentiate for an exceeding child without giving them just more work? They don't need more work at the same level. They need higher level work. Okay, so I'm going to leave that with you to read through because it's again, differentiation will take us a bit to get our heads around. Okay, here we go. Transition. Transitions are what will students do, how will they, when they're finished, and how will they move to the next learning opportunity. So basically is you want them keep the transitions linked to the outcomes of a lesson. So here, the outcomes of a lesson, I introduced the Grinch. So the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, because that's going to be our Reader's Theater. So as students return to the theater while listening to the song and see if they can predict what script we're going to prepare. So as they're wandering back to their desks, they're listening to the song and thinking about the lesson versus just cruising back to their desk and totally zoning out, right? Or pushing their friend or those kind of things. So again, it helps with classroom management. And then you can sing You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, because lots of kids will know that. So if students are, this is also where the transition time is, where if you know that a student is going to be finished quickly, you'll get to know. Plan activities that are linked to the outcomes and not just busy work. So don't just say, okay, go color, or go do a crossword puzzle. There's nothing inherently wrong with coloring our crossword puzzles, but if that's the only thing that you do for those kids who are finished early, again, you want to be engaging with them in a more authentic manner. Okay, here, time, I would put minutes and actual time. So it's going to be 25 minutes and then put the actual time, because that's probably what you're going to be looking at. You'll be looking at the clock and going, okay, I'm on time. Okay, and again, here is another detailed learning opportunity. So have students highlight their individual lines on pages 1 to 4. Their names are beside their lines on each copy. Okay. If this is a particular tip for Reader's Theater, if you ever do a Reader's Theater, don't just get the kids to highlight lines. They will inevitably highlight incorrect lines, and then it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So put their names, it takes you a bit of time again, put their names beside their lines, and then they can highlight them. Then they probably won't make so many mistakes. Okay, when they're done highlighting, once they're done highlighting, they can find a comfortable place in the classroom to individually practice lines, so they get a little bit of a chance to do some individual work. Then they have a body break. You're mean one, Mr. Grinch. And they come back together on the carpet, and then we read through it, and then we teach them a little song by rote, and then they come back to do their day 7 checklist at the end. Okay, so under accommodations, for lessons you're creating as a college assignment and not for a particular class, think about students either from your practicum who need accommodation, or use the imaginary classroom students. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in Lesson Plan Explained. But have a little bit of a go thinking about how you're going to accommodate for real live students. It makes it easier. These could be kids that are on ISPs, or that have behavioral issues, or a child with cerebral palsy, or a child with autism. Again, you have to know where that child is on the spectrum. Okay, let's cruise down here to closure. Closure is necessary to consolidate the lessons learning for the students, emphasizing what was important to learn and why, and possibly how it fits into the bigger picture. This is not the time for you to just recap what happened in the class, because if you just say, okay, today we learned about readers, if I just said, okay, we learned about readers theater, and these are the characteristics, blah, 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 do I have any clue if the students actually reach those outcomes? No, this is another time for you to assess. So if, for example, they watch this readers theater example again with PowerPoint beside them and point to the characteristics they're seeing in the video, if none of the kids point to any characteristics of the video, have they learned any of my outcomes? Probably not. Then I have to make a decision, right? Then I have to decide, do I teach this concept again? Why didn't they understand it? Do I need to incorporate more experiences? What do I need to do? And so then that's what the closure is. The closure is not just, thanks everybody, it was a great class, it's time for phys ed, right? This is key educational time. You must keep the closure linked to your learning outcomes, right? So if I don't see closure linked to your learning outcomes, I'm gonna be like, you gotta link these because it's important. And if you are just doing all of the talking at the end, then it's not true closure. Also, watch your timing. And I was so bad at this as a teacher. I always ran out of time. But aim for time management where you actually get to the closure. Oftentimes we only get halfway through our learning opportunities, and then we're like, okay, go! You gotta go out for recess or it's the end of the day. So start to think about that time management as an essential piece. Okay, and then we get into lesson plan analysis. Using the lesson plan above, describe the following. This information must be in your learning opportunities. It must be in here somewhere, right? Wherever your learning opportunities are. There. If it's not listed in your learning opportunities, do not just put it in here. Do not just put random stuff in here. It makes us nuts. Okay, because this is just a check for you. If you look through your lesson and you have no cooperative or collaborative learning strategies, you probably want to go back and put some in. But don't list them here if they're not in a learning opportunity. Okay, same thing. If you don't have a body break, make sure that you go back and you look, and if you don't have one, you put one in. Okay, and higher order questions, again, make sure, I think we have, be sure that the learning opportunity is actually at a higher level of thinking. So when you say, I'm going to have the students create a mobile where a student writes out the definitions of figurative language and then attaches them to the hanger, is not creating at a higher level. They're basically just regurgitating or recalling, which is lower level blooms. We need some lower level blooms, absolutely. But creating is actually taking the information and creating something new with it. So just because you say, oh, they're creating a mobile, it's actually not higher level blooms. It's actually the lowest level blooms because they're just copying and pasting basically in there. Okay. After teaching the lesson, be sure to reflect on it. And you're going to have a chance to do that. This is where you scribble frantically. Okay, that took way longer than I thought. The kids actually really loved it, but this could be a 2-day lesson, or things like the YouTube video really helped them visualize what was expected of it. Keep it. Writing on personal whiteboard, help me assess. Be sure to hand in the whiteboards immediately so they don't get stepped on. Darn, they stepped all over the whiteboards, didn't anticipate that. So these are the things either that you didn't anticipate and you're like, oh, to make the lesson better next time, I need to anticipate, that the whiteboards are going to be all over the place, and that's an issue. Okay. And not all students who needed help with pronunciation came to me, even though I offered it. How can I help them while still keeping dignity and giving choice? So you write here things that went well and things that didn't go so well. Okay. So hopefully having an actual example and having the comments from the lesson plan explained will actually help you to really see what we're after. Is it a fair bit of work at the beginning? After you've been teaching 5-10 years, you can basically write your lesson plan on a napkin. Until you get to that point, we want you to be writing all of these things out on this lesson plan template so that you are really used to thinking about everything, right? Because if you just only focus on the learning outcomes or the learning opportunities, that's great. But you have to be thinking about all these other things. Where am I going? What are the outcomes? What's my hook? How do I check that they understand? Materials, transitions, differentiation. All these things are essential to an amazing lesson plan. Okay, so I am just going to go to and just show you this one. This is a lesson plan explained version 2 that Laura Lee explained to you. Actually, I'll just leave it there. So this is basically everything that I've just talked about is on this as well in here. So use these 2 lesson plan resources to guide how you write lessons. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. Go through, stop, revisit this video again and again as you develop more and more lesson plans. Okay, awesome. Take care.